Hello, ladies. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that may be. Let's talk about sex. Hello, and welcome to Chapter 19 of Book 1 of You Should Be Reading. And I'd just like to take a moment to wish everyone a happy Valentine's Day, which was yesterday. I hope you all had a good one. To all of those who don't have significant others, people to be with, I still hope you had a good day. Uh, Today, I hope you went out and bought lots of discount chocolate. Either way, happy Valentine's Day. And I figured, Valentine's Day being so close to when I was doing another one of these, that I would do one with some romance in it. Some romance, some love, etc., etc. So, today, we're going to be looking at Spider's Bite by Jennifer Estep, the first book in the Elemental Assassin series. A really wonderful modern day urban fantasy type thing with monsters and good stuff. Now, this book is about an assassin by the name of Gin Blanco. Gin, like the liquor. Blanco, of course, white, etc. A bit of a play on words there. I kind of like it. Now, Gin is what they call an elemental. She can use elemental magic. There's different kinds of elementals. You've got your standard stone, air, fire, water, but you've also got some of the lesser known elementals. There's metal, there's ice, there's electricity, and I'm pretty sure there's other ones as well. Now, where things get interesting, and why I'm saying, going into a book about assassins with love and Valentine's Day and romance, is that in her books there's definitely some romance. Jin, being a healthy and mature woman, yeah, she may be an assassin, she may be a cold-blooded killer, doesn't mean she doesn't like the idea of having someone. And she's very much interesting and very much, well, let's just say that bar none, as in I've never read any books that have really done it quite as well as Jennifer Estep has. But these books with Jin, she has managed, the author, to write sex scenes into her books that are not only realistic, not only interesting and erotic to read and kind of fun, but they're also, like I said, they're realistic, but they're believable within the scope of the book, within the reality. I mean, Jin is very much a risk taker. She's an assassin. So while some of the times when she is getting it on, it's not really what most normal people would be like. I would never do that. There's too much of a risk of this, and this. Well, Jin's not exactly like that. So regardless of that, that's just one of the little topics about this particular book that I wanted to bring up. And she has consistently had at least one in almost every book. Not all of them have something like that, but usually about one per book. And they fit into the narrative well, and they're believable, and They may last maybe a few pages. Nothing particularly overly descriptive and graphic, but definitely very, very erotic, very sexually charged. I like them. I enjoyed reading them. And not just because, granted, this is the internet. I'm sure if people want to find that sort of thing, purely for that sort of thing, it's out there. There's multiple ways to do it, not just in a book. But including stuff like that into a narrative can always be a tricky subject. So kudos to Miss Estep for getting it right and doing it well. Now, that aside, now that we've segued that into Valentine's Day and all this and that, onto the story. So what's it about? Well, it's about Jin Blanco. She's an assassin, and she gets hired to take out some guy. No idea why. No real information. The money, the price is right, so she goes to do it. Only something kind of goes wrong. Things don't go as planned. She ends up not killing the guy and barely escaping without getting caught. On her way back to her handler, who was also her teacher and mentor and pretty much a father figure to her, she heads back to the place where they work out of, which is the Pork Pit. It's a little barbecue restaurant and this is all set in like Georgia, like down south. So barbecue, good food, all of that. She gets back there and finds her mentor dead, killed at the hands of what she's pretty sure is an air elemental. Now, from there, she goes to find out who was behind it, because this happening right after this assassination attempt, it's kind of connecting together. So her sort of foster brother, who was her mentor's real son, he and her team up. He's kind of very much an informational type of a guy, very big on finances, very much a playboy. He helps her with information. He's a really good shot with a rifle. And they go and start tracking down information, finding out who was behind it and why. And she's going to kill them, because that's what she does. She's an assassin. And it kind of goes from there. There's this a bit of a romantic love interest plot with a rigidly moral detective by the name of Donovan Kane, who ends up kind of protecting the guy that she was hired to kill. They kind of clash. There's some raw sexual tension going on there. Things happen that probably shouldn't. All kinds of good stuff. It proceeds like that for a couple of books. Then he leaves. She finds a legitimate love interest later on. I'm not going to spoil too much of it. There's about 10 books in the series now, and they're all equally fun, snarky, definitely a snarky sense of humor. Jin is very much cocky and confident, even though she does have her insecurities. All around, she's a believable character. It's kind of like, I don't know if any of you have seen like the TV show Leverage, something along those lines, or the newer one by the same guy, The Librarians. You have these people that are believable, but there's a lot of snark going on, kicking back and forth. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is another one. There's always witty lines being tossed back and forth. There's a lot of that in this type of in this book. There's definitely a lot of fun things, but it's a really fun ride. Ha ha ha. Yes. So yeah, I would definitely highly recommend it to anyone. It is a good series. Jennifer Estep. I don't see that. See that name? Right there. Someone to watch out for. I would read her books. So, Spider's Bite, my friends. I think you should be reading it. And this week, I'm going to leave you with this. My name is Jin, and I kill people. Normally, my confession would have elicited gasps of surprise, pale faces, nervous sweat, stifled screams, an overturned chair or two as people scrambled to get away before I buried a knife in their heart or back. A sucking wound was a sucking wound. I wasn't picky about where I caused it. Hi, Jin. 4 people chorused back to me in perfect, dull, monotone unison. But not in this place. Within the walled confines of Ashland Asylum, my confession, true though it might be, didn't even merit a raised eyebrow, much less shock and frightened awe. I was relatively normal compared to the freaks of nature and magic who populated the grounds. Like Jackson, the 7-foot-tall albino giant seated to my left who drooled worse than a mastiff and gurgled like a 3-month-old child. A long string of clear, glistening spittle dripped out of his oversized lips, but Jackson was too busy cooing nonsense to the crude daisy tattooed on the back of his hand to pay attention, or do something sane and hygienic like wipe his mouth. I shifted away from him so I wouldn't come into contact with the oozing mucus. Disgusting. But Jackson was typical of the sorts of folks in the asylum. Asylum. The word always made me smile. Such a pretty name for a hellhole. It was bad enough I'd been stuck here for almost a week, but what really set me on edge was the noise, and having to listen to the building around me. The screams of the damned and deranged had long ago sunk into the granite walls and floors of the asylum, the way all emotions and actions do over time. Being a stone elemental, I could feel the vibrations in the rock and hear the constant insane chatter even through the industrial carpet and my white cotton socks. When I'd first gotten here, I tried to reach out to the stone, or to use my own magic to bring it a bit of comfort, or at least quiet the screams so I could get some sleep at night, but it had been no use. The stones were too far gone to listen or respond to my magic, just like the poor souls who shuffled along on top of them. Now I just blocked out the damn noise, the way I did so many other things. A woman at the head of the circle of plastic chairs leaned forward. She was directly across from me, so it was easy for her light eyes to find mine. Now, Jin, you've made this claim before. We've discussed this. You only think you're an assassin. You are most certainly not one. Evelyn Edwards, the shrink who was supposed to cure all the crazies in this magical nuthouse. She radiated professional cool and confidence in her tight black pantsuit, ivory blouse, and kitten heels. Square black glasses hung on the end of her pointed nose, highlighting her greenish eyes, and her sandy hair was cropped into a short, tousled bob. Evelyn was pretty enough, but a hungry look pinched her pasty face, a look I recognized. The hard gaze of a sly predator. The reason I was here today. I most certainly am not a mere assassin, I countered. I'm the Spider. Surely you've heard of me. Evelyn rolled her eyes and looked at the tall orderly, standing just beyond the ring of chairs. He snickered and then raised his finger to his temple and made a circle. Of course I've heard of the Spider, Evelyn said, attempting to be patient. Everybody's heard of the Spider, but you are certainly not him. Her, I corrected. The orderly snickered again. I raised an eyebrow in displeasure. The joke was on him because that laugh had just cost him his life. I didn't care to be mocked, even if I'd spent the last few days masquerading as a loon. In order to kill people, you have to get close to them. Put yourself in their world. Make their likes your likes, their habits your habits, their thoughts your thoughts. For this job, putting myself in Evelyn Edwards' world had meant getting tossed into Ashland Asylum. To Evelyn and her orderly underlings, I was just another shizzo dragged off the streets, driven crazy by elemental magic, drugs, or a combination of the two. Another poor, lost ward of the state who wasn't worth their time, attention, consideration, or sympathy. I spent the last few days locked up in the asylum, convincing Evelyn and the others that I was just as Junebug crazy as the rest of the babbling psychos. Spouting nonsense about being an assassin, drooling, finger-painting with the moldy peas they served for lunch. I'd even hacked off gobs of my long bleach blonde hair during craft time to keep up the pretense. The orderlies on call had taken the scissors away from me, but not before I'd used them to pry a screw loose from the rec room table. The same screw I'd sharpened into a 2-inch-long, dart-like point. The same screw I had palmed in my hand. The same screw I was going to shove into Evelyn's throat. The weapon rested on my palm, and the steel felt rough against my scarred skin. Hard, substantial, cold, comforting. Of course, I didn't really need a weapon to kill the shrink. I could have offed Evelyn with my stone magic, could have reached for the elemental power flowing through my veins, could have tapped into the acres of granite the asylum was constructed out of and made the whole building come crashing down on her head. Using my stone magic was easier than breathing. Call it professional pride, but I didn't like to use my elemental power to kill unless I absolutely had to, unless there was no other way to get the job done. Just too easy otherwise. But even more important, magic got you noticed in these parts, especially elemental magic. If I started collapsing buildings on people or braining them with bricks, the police and other more unsavory characters would be sure to take note, and an unhealthy interest in me. I had made more than my share of enemies over the years, and the only reason I'd stayed alive this long was by keeping to the shadows, by creeping in and out of places completely unnoticed, just the way my namesake did. Besides, there were plenty of ways to make someone quit breathing. I didn't need my magic to help me with that. The spider, Evelyn's scarlet lips twitched, and she allowed herself a small titter. As if someone like you could be someone like that, the most feared assassin in the South. East of the Mississippi, I corrected her again, and I most certainly am the spider. In fact, I'm going to kill you, Evelyn. T-minus 3 minutes and counting. Maybe it was the calm way I stared at her, my gray eyes steady and level, or perhaps it was the complete lack of emotion in my tone. But the laughter caught and died in Evelyn's throat like an animal in a trap. She wouldn't be too far behind. I got to my feet and stretched my arms over my head, moving the screw into a better position in my hand. The long-sleeved white t-shirt I wore rode up over my matching pajama pants, exposing my flat stomach. The tall orderly licked his lips, his eyes locked on my crotch. Dead man walking. So, what do you think of that? Interesting, is it not? Jennifer Estep, Spider's Bite. This week, you should be reading it. And until next time, read more books.